Thank you for joining us as we take a moment and look at God's Word. Jesus warned about people calling other people fool. A fool in the biblical sense was an unbeliever that is destined to the fiery judgment of God. And Jesus said, you've gone too far if you do that. However, God can call you a fool. And if in God's Word you're called a fool, then the judge, the only judge that counts, has the right to call you a fool. And in Psalm 14, verse 1, the fool has said in his heart, there is no God. In Psalm 53, verse 1, the fool has said in his heart, there is no God. And in 1 Corinthians 15, he calls unbelieving Corinthians fools. Yeah. Why would he do that? They're asking a question is all that they're doing at the beginning of this passage. You know, there's a difference, though, in what you mean when you ask the question. For example, when the angel Gabriel said to Mary, you're going to conceive in your womb and have a child, and he's going to be great and be called the Son of the Highest and rule over the house of Jacob, and of his kingdom there will be no end. She said, how are we going to do that? I'm a virgin. In other words, it was a question of logistics. But earlier, there was a priest by the name of Zechariah, and the Lord said, you've been praying for your wife Elizabeth to be with child, and your prayers have been answered. She's going to be with child. She's going to have a child that'll go before the Lord and be his forerunner. And he said, how can this be? Because we're old. So in the first case, it was, how are we going to do that? In the second case, it was, how can you do that? In other words, he was asking out of doubt. How can God do that? God can do anything he wants, anytime. If you limit God at all, you insult God. And John the Baptist's daddy insulted God. Oh, by the way, he repented later. So here we go. So this isn't a question of how does it happen. This is a question of how can it happen. Doubting the power of God. Someone will say, how are the dead raised? With what kind of body do they come? In other words, how in the world can you do that? And he says, you fool. In other words, dummy? Let me show you some things just from nature around you. That which you sow doesn't come to life unless it dies. That which you sow, you do not sow the body which is to be, but bear grain, whether wheat or something else. God gives it a body just as he wished, and to each of the seeds a body of its own. All flesh is not the same flesh. There's one flesh of men, another flesh of beasts, another flesh of birds, another flesh of fish. There are heavenly bodies and earthly bodies. The glory of the heavenly is one, and the glory of the earthly is another. One glory of the sun, another glory of the moon, another glory of the stars. One star differs from another star in glory. So also is the resurrection of the dead. It's sown a perishable body, raised an imperishable body. In other words, you see it all around you. And you're saying, how in the world can God give me a different flesh than what I've got right now? Duh. Okay. And so he gives resurrected believers a different body, just like he's already giving different bodies to things in nature. I'm all done. Have a great day.